people are really scared of talking to CFOs because it's their job to be financially responsible and it's their job to push back. So a lot of times sellers don't want to talk to them because they assume if I bring this up, maybe it's going to be no, do I fly under the radar? We might have been able to get away with that when interest rates were at 0%. They are not at 0% anymore. Lean into the hard conversations, lean into them early, and ask your primary contact, like, who really has to approve this? Who do you think is going to disrupt this? Who's going to disagree? Who's going to push back? And let's get in a room and talk to them and get them bought in early so they can become your biggest advocates.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the eMarketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Lauren is the Chief Marketing Officer at Salesloft. So thanks so much for joining me. And the first question is really like, what's the latest elevator pitch your sales teams are using for Salesloft?
Oh, great question. And it's really, really great to be here, Kevin. So Salesloft is the leading sales engagement platform. We have everything a revenue team needs to hit their numbers all in one place.
Great. Well, I mean, there are lots of point solutions, right? And the all-in-one place thing might confuse some buyers. So when the buyers come back and say, well, I have a CRM, which is really sort of a renamed Salesforce automation platform, even though it's, called CRM. And, then there's things that help me with drip campaigns. Like, can you really package it all in one place? I guess will probably be the question your sales teams hear a lot.
Totally. And that, I come from the world of CRM, that I was at Salesforce, about 1,000 years ago. So I was at Salesforce in 2008 to 2012, 13-ish, it all blurs together. And what CRM is really good at is being your database. It's where you're going to store information. Who are you talking to? What Salesloft is all about action. So we are the workflow tool for every seller. So think about, how do you want to reach out to your customers? Do you want to send them emails? Do you want to call them? What are you going to do to really understand and forecast? How do you actually know if your team is going to hit your numbers? If you're a sales manager, things like coaching is incredibly critical for your sellers to actually hit their goals. So when we look at the Salesforce platform, we integrate deals, cadences, which think about as the actual actions sellers take to reach out to their customers. We tie in forecasting, we tie in coaching all into one place. So you can really see the effect of what activities are the sellers doing? Are the sellers being coached? What's happening on a deals perspective? And that also will lead into, are you going to hit your numbers?
Yeah, that does sound like it meets a lot of needs at the same time. One thing that I notice in B2B in particular is that the KPIs that the marketing teams are using and the KPIs that the sales teams are using need to be really well aligned, right? Whereas sometimes in consumer-based marketing, especially when you've got distribution channels, it can get a lot more fuzzy. Like brand awareness is a KPI, and of course, sales teams don't care about brand awareness. They care about Glenn Gary leads and Glenn Ross leads. Like that's the kinds of things that get them excited. So what are some best practices around KPI alignment? Like if there's a Salesloft customer, or just in general advice to folks who are trying to make sure that their marketing KPIs and their sales KPIs are aligned?
I stole this quote many years ago, and I'm gonna say that it's mine. I stole it from Craig, and it is your marketing KPI should be something you can buy a beer with. So if your marketing KPIs are, how many leads did I generate? And sales is thinking about, what's my revenue number? What's my bookings number? It's obvious why there's conflict, because sales is talking about one thing, marketing is talking about something completely different. At a minimum, B2B marketers need to be focused on pipeline. Is what we're doing driving pipeline? More importantly, is it driving quality pipeline that's closing? Things that I've had both at Salesloft and in past parts of my career is marketing really owns all pipeline for the business. It's not just sourced by marketing, but marketing should be touching every single deal, whether it's coming in through one of our leads or it's a deal that an outbound seller cold called and got in. We should be touching and influencing every deal, monitoring that pipeline. And is it set up at the right scale and velocity to actually help close and help sellers hit their numbers.
Yeah, that's a great point. Another thing that I think sometimes disconnects sales from marketing a little bit is this idea of like a lead, right? Well, clearly all leads are not created equal. There's great leads and bad leads. Some leads have greater opportunity. Some leads are maybe easier to close. And so the idea of lead scoring and really understanding, like, is this a good one? Is this a Glenn Gary lead or a Glenn Ross lead? And then what the size of the opportunity is super important. So how do platforms help in that to make sure that like the sales teams can use their time efficiently?
There's so much great technology out there now in terms of lead scoring, account scoring, intent scoring. I remember when I started as a B2B marketer, the best we could do was like, I think this keyword drives better leads than this keyword, or I think a sales VP is a better lead than a sales intern. Thanks to tools like a 6sense or a demand base that are actually giving you that real intent data to know this lead has the highest propensity to buy. We use something internally at Salesloft called CapDB, where we have looked at what are our target accounts, what's our target profile, what's our ICP. So we'll take all of that data that's like, this is our ICP, this is the best industry, company size, here's all of these data points, and then we overlay it with intent data. So this is what the profile is, and this is who is in market right now. And those are the leads you want to get to your best sellers as quickly as possible, because they're more likely to buy and they're more likely to buy bigger deals.
That's great. One thing that's also changed since you and I were first out there, either selling or marketing or helping sales teams get leads, is that often the primary sort of view into marketing communications is now the smartphone, right? Whereas it used to be 100% desktop, right? Especially in B2B, like you didn't really have to worry about the phone except if you wanted to call the person, right? And now, you've got this tinier screen and not a lot of screen real estate to get the point across. How has that changed how both your internal sales teams operate? And then what's your best practices for other folks?
So it really is two things, both on the marketing side and the sales side. So something we think a ton about at Salesloft for our customers is, what is the right experience to give to sellers? So having a mobile device. So Salesloft is fully available on a mobile device because we know everyone is on the go. Sellers are on the go. What can they do to really engage with accounts regardless of where they are? And then on the marketing side, you're right. Our real estate is so much smaller now compared to where it used to be. It becomes a bit of a back to basics. So in the pre-digital days of marketing, when we thought a ton about what's your positioning, what are you saying, how are you telling that story, the importance of that is at the top of the list now, because you have a tiny bit of real estate. What's the right message? How do you capture intent, and how do you capture intention in as small real estate as possible, as succinctly as possible?
That's great advice. Back to basics is probably going to be the 2023 mantra for a lot of folks.
100%.
One thing is I hear that sales individuals are struggling with, but also their managers to some extent, is the balance between sort of whale hunting and tuna fishing, right? Because the whales take longer to close. They may be much greater opportunities, but you can still feed the village on tuna, right? So how do you balance your time going across that sort of spectrum? You don't want the minnows because they don't feed anybody, right? But the tuna and the whales are both good, viable sales candidates. Any thoughts there?
I mean, a lot of it is like sellers want to make sure they're putting points on the board and they're not just focusing 100% on the whales, because if it doesn't close, it's a very uncomfortable year.
Exactly.
There's this super interesting stat that I think Forrester came out with that was only 30% of sellers' time is actually done selling. So most of sellers' time is doing all of that other stuff. It's the admin, it's the things that take away from, hey, Kevin, do you want to buy my product right now? And here's the reasons it's amazing. So things I think a ton about is, what can you automate from a seller's experience that a seller doesn't necessarily need to do? It's not about just like throwing the bots out there. You need personalization, but take some of the work off their plate. And then another thing is, what can you do to take intent signals to show these are the accounts that are in market right now? Again, there's some really good software out there that will start to overlay, this customer is looking to buy right now. As an example, both Drift and Qualify do this for the chat software on their website, the little chat bot that shows up on your website that will look at, these are the accounts that are coming to your website right now. They're visiting high intent pages. They are a potentially open lead or an early stage opportunity. This is a great indicator to refocus your time. Let's get that lead in front of the seller right now so they follow up, because one of the most important factors with closing a deal is time. So really, really focusing on that.
Yeah, I think recency from both a touch points perspective and speed from a feedback perspective for the sales teams getting out and back in touch is key. Last thing you want to do is find out they made the decision yesterday. Like nothing's more exasperating than that.
100%. It's like, you could have had that deal if only you actually picked up the phone or knew they were looking at that second.
Yeah, exactly. So changing gears a little bit, California has been in the forefront of privacy related regulation. And so CCPA, first got implemented with regards to consumer data. But in January 1st, the CCPA exemption for businesses, including nonprofits, expired. And I think there's still a little bit of a grace period there. I'm not a lawyer, but I certainly know that we're sort of scrambling to make sure that we've got our ducks in a row with regards to that. Do you feel like B2B marketers have their act together in that area?
This is one of my favorite phrases I've learned at Salesloft is feelings, not facts. So this is my feeling. So my feelings, not facts on this is, we all had a heads up on this, but most of us are still playing catch up a little bit. And with with a lot of privacy regulations, there is that gray area. It's not a do this in every instance. It's not totally black and white. What we do isn't totally black and white. So people are still figuring out specifically what we need to do, fixing the systems, the process. I think we're better prepared than like when GDPR first came out and the whole world of marketers were trying to figure out how to market with the beginning of GDPR. So we're in better shape, but I think many, many marketers still need the grace period to figure out exactly how to execute and work in this world.
Yeah, I think a lot of marketers are actually, and in particular within the nonprofit community where they just have even less resources, they're just crossing their fingers and hoping that the legislators who sort of proposed an extension of the exemption for businesses and nonprofits will actually come back into session this year and say, that was a bit onerous. Let's back off a little bit or whatever, because it is really a huge, it's an onerous set of regulations for businesses to comply with.
It is. And if you're a small business, if you're a nonprofit, it is hard to make such big shifts in what you do. And you might not even have a full-time person that actually does your email or database marketing or fully understand what do I need to change, because maybe the nonprofit owner is the one who is actually doing some of the executing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they run leaner than anybody else at nonprofits. I know because I run one. But one other thing that I think 2023 is possibly going to force us to think about is, will the sales cycle slow down if there's a recession? Because in B2B marketing, often people just want to kick the can down the road in making bigger decisions. Obviously, the size of the decision tends to correlate to how much the sales cycle lengthens. So for your Salesloft customers and clients who are struggling with that and rethinking how do they do their pipeline forecasting, any best practices around that you can share?
Definitely. So we've been thinking a ton about this, and we've seen it with some of our customers is in a lot of cases, deal cycles are getting longer. You're seeing more scrutiny over deals. You're seeing more CFO involvement. I've even heard of cases where the CEO has to approve all purchases over a certain size. So there just is more scrutiny. It doesn't mean deals aren't getting done. It's just we need to be prepared for a change in how to work the deal. So tips that I have are a couple. One is make sure you understand the value case you have for your customers. So if you are able to directly connect with revenue, you're able to directly connect with productivity, share that information during the sales process. Find out really who the buying committee is and how that shifted. If the CFO is now involved, make sure as a seller and as a marketer, we know what the message is to a CFO buyer, to a CEO buyer, so we have those proof points. And when we're doing things, I think a ton about pipeline models in my role, and pipeline being the leading indicator of revenue. We can't assume last year's model works this year and for this year's play. So one of the things that I've looked at internally for building our pipeline model is let's not look at the law of averages. I don't want to look at average deal size across all of 2022. Averages are going to hide what's really going on. Look at your deal cycle, your average deal size and deal cycle in Q1, look at it in Q2, then look at it in Q3, look at it in Q4. And if you've seen changes in deal cycle, in win rate, how long deals are stuck in specific stages, bake that into your pipeline model, bake in that buffer, and then put in checks. So if you know you're starting to see deals stuck in stage 3, monitor stage 3. At a certain point, if a deal is still stuck, dig in, figure out why, and make sure sales is armed with the materials they need to go in and say, we're stuck in stage 3 because all of a sudden CFOs are involved. Great. Here's what you need to do to talk to CFOs. Don't be afraid of this.
Yeah, that actually dovetails perfectly into my next question, because you mentioned sort of more players than usual. And whether it's sales managers or CROs, many of them still have this sort of unicorn idea of, oh, there's a decision maker, right? Like as if there was one person and that was all they needed to talk to. And the reality over the years has become more and more committee-based decision making. And then, you know, as you sort of alluded to with a CFO or CEO, a person who has veto power, right, who really waits until the last year, right at the finish line, and all of a sudden a potential veto shows up. Like it could be vetoed based on price or any reason, right? And so how should folks use whatever platform they're using to sort of take into account the sort of ABM, you know, decision by committee, including people who might be completely off the radar as an influencer? Like, you know, there may just be a checkbox, right, that has to get checked. Any thoughts there?
So it's funny. This used to be one of my most obscure references, but thanks to recent cinema, it is less obscure. My favorite book since I was in high school is Dune. Like, I love it. I still, 100 years later, it's my favorite book. So I make these obscure Dune references, but now that it's been a popular movie, it's less obscure. But there's a phrase in there that it's not who controls the spice, it's who disrupts the spice. And I think about that a lot. It's not who like you think is the signer of the deal that is the most powerful. It is the people who can disrupt that and say, you know what, I don't know about that one. So what we need to do even more now than ever is understand who the buying committee is, understand who the influencers. So doing account mapping, whether it's, I don't ever think it should be sales on their own to do all the account mapping. Where can marketing jump in and help? And how can we do this together? So if you are selling to a 1,000-person B2B tech company and you are selling marketing software, maybe it's the CMO, maybe it's the VP of that function. Okay, who are the people that are actually going to use that product? Who are the people that are going to be positively or negatively impacted by the product? Also, who are the people in that company that have strong connections with the company, the vendor, or the vendor's competitors? You don't know who all of the players are. So spend that time early on, like talking with your primary contact, really understand the playing field, and don't lean away from it. I'll use the CFO as an example. Like, I adore our CFO. We did a really, really good video webinar with one of our SVPs in finance that was all about, like, how do you sell to CFOs? People are really scared of talking to CFOs because it's their job to be financially responsible. and it's their job to push back. So a lot of times sellers don't want to talk to them because they assume if I bring this up, maybe it's going to be no, do I fly under the radar? We might have been able to get away with that when interest rates were at 0%. They are not at 0% anymore. Lean into the hard conversations, lean into them early, and ask your primary contact, like, who really has to approve this? Who do you think is going to disrupt this? Who's going to disagree? Who's going to push back? And let's get in a room and talk to them and get them bought in early so they can become your biggest advocates.
That's all really great advice. One area in which this sort of percolates up into marketing, and I think makes our marketing job more exciting, but also harder, is the pain points for those other constituencies may require a different set of messaging, right? And then you have to 100%. Decide, is it worth me carving out a marketing campaign specific to that kind of messaging? Because that's what those people care about. The CFO cares about different things than the people down on the line, right? And yet you need everybody to be on board, right? So, when you size that market of people with different needs, you have to sort of think, okay, now I got to figure out how to reach those people. And then what's the message to them? And like, are they the leading message? Like, are they the first ones to get the messaging, or do I sort of bring them along as we're sort of in conversations already and try to find them through custom audiences or other ways? Like, it really becomes choreography. Like on a whiteboard, you have to really
100%.
And I think it makes it fun, but it also makes it hard work.
It does, and I find this interesting. I hope this not to offend any of our incredible B2C marketers out there, because that's not my background. This is why I always liked B2B and leaned into B2B, because I was like, B2C, there's one buyer, they swipe a credit card, it's amazing. I was like, give me B2B where you're going, build me the map and the web of who all the people are. What do they care about? How do I craft the narrative? Like, I find it so interesting and just like intellectually stimulating. And when I think about this for a $5,000 commercial deal, it becomes less cost effective if you're just doing lots and lots of tiny deals to build out all this custom message. Sure. But if you've got enterprise, if you've got big deals, it becomes even more important. And I think about marketing as the public facing, like the ads on the internet that we do, and then the down to the materials that we give to the salespeople. So sometimes I don't necessarily need an external campaign with messaging for specific people, influencers and different personas. But what I really need is to make sure the sales team has pitch points and messaging so they know how to talk to a CFO or a leader in a different department that they've never thought before. So they have those messaging points. Maybe they have a one-sheeter or a leave behind on this is what this is. Maybe we give them a video and it's all about internal enablement. And then what I think is a ton of fun is when you have a really deep alignment on account-based marketing. So let's say you've got like $1 million deal. This is where it warrants it. You've got $1 million deal, or you've got this massive 6-figure deal. And you have the account-based marketer and the seller on that account literally sit down and say, give me all the people. Who are all the people on this account? Okay, what are their personas? What do they care about? And then that's when I pull in custom audiences. And that's when I'm going, here's the 5 people that they're not going to be the lead who comes in, who I need to get excited. They're the people that when it comes across their desk, they go, oh, I've heard of that. Yes, I think it's going to find value. That's when you're like, okay, for these personas, these 5 people who fit in these 5 persona categories, I'm going to build custom audiences. I don't care if they click on my ad. I don't care if they download something. This is all about an influence campaign. Like that, I love doing. And then when the seller comes back and says, this VP who got pulled in at the last minute goes, oh no, I've heard great things about you. I've heard you do this, this, and this. And secretly as the marketer, you're like, yes.
Yeah,
I did my job.
Absolutely. That's where the sort of guerrilla marketing stuff comes in, right? Yeah. Because it's like air cover that you're providing to the sales teams. So we'll even though the labor is pretty intensive, we'll do IPGO targeting of a headquarters, right? So yeah, sure.
Yes.
Even the janitor sees the ad. I don't care, right? I mean, everybody in the company is going to see the ad, and we're going
Yep.
to be high on it, right? And we're going to make sure that it gets on people's radar. So that kind of stuff, you spend like $200 on the media, but like $5,000 worth of labor to set it up, right? Because it's just so valuable, and that stuff is really fun to do. And again, you would never see that in a B2C context, right? It's really a B2B marketing strategy. So what channels are B2B marketers forgetting to use that they should consider?
That's a great question. We're back to doing a bunch of direct mail, where I think there was a long time when everything was digital and you're like, we don't do direct mail. And now there's companies like Sandoso and Alice. So that's back in sort of fashion now. Events are very, very many places back. We're doing the webinars. So I think out of home is also coming back, because with out of home, you can do some awesome targeting. Like out front media, you can do such great things with right now in terms of targeting, even though it looks like your traditional billboard, but it's not. Right. So my thing, and this is sort of a weird answer, non-answer, I think good marketers have access to all the same channels. I remember back when you and I first met, and it was the earlier days of like the internet and digital, you were good if you knew how to target and how to access all of these different channels, because no one else did. Now everyone has access to targeting and channels. We can do it. You can be more strategic and get that extra lift. What I think we're not doing as much now, again, going back to basics, it is, we all can do the same custom audiences. We can do this. Let's not assume that's table stakes. Let's focus on, okay, we're going to get the VP of IT security that does this. Okay, what's the right message for the VP of IT security in this region? Let's make the message hit them over the head. This is the thing that keeps me up at night. Now, this is how I'm going to solve your problem. It is the back to basics on messaging. And then you put that on, here's the channel and here's the targeting. Like, that's when magic gets made. And I fear a little bit now that marketers are too focused on, if I target and I use the right channel, they'll come. And I was like, only if it is the right message. Otherwise, the channels and the targeting are like almost a moot point.
Yeah. I guess it's like everybody gets the same ingredients, but there are some chefs that are really good and other people who can't cook, right? So
hey, I'm the latter.
But only in the kitchen. But in the marketing sphere,
in the marketing sphere, I got it. In the kitchen, I was like, that is delicious, fancy salt. That's the best I got.
Right, exactly. Actually, we have a pretty big B2B division that does direct mail, and I actually had my tech team build a direct mail technology that puts a custom QR code on every single piece of mail, so that when the person scans it, it pings the sales technology, whatever it is, CRM, and lets the sales team know, here's a touch point, this person might be interested, even if they abandon the landing page. Right. So it's been a really great way to get the Glengarry leads out of direct mail one step sooner. Direct mail is back. The other thing we've done is from some list providers, we can get the home addresses of the executives as well. And because they're doing work from home, we'll dual mail. We'll mail to their work address and to their home address. Right. Because it's the person we're marketing to, not the place. Right. They just happen to be in that place.
100%. And that where I take that sort of even a level deeper is like, you have the place, you know what to do. And I love that you have the tracking. And then as the marketers think about what to do with that, I was like, okay, I know this because now I know why I get things at my house, Kevin. I'm not opposed to it. And so you get this and you're like, okay, you got the executive, you have that access, we can track it. It then becomes, what are you putting in there? And so I will give you a weird example. Like, I'm a very tiny person. I am 5 feet tall. It is not hard to see on the internet that I am barely the size of an adult. I recently got this very beautiful box of swag that came over from a potential vendor. Everything in there is a large. it's a men's large or a women's large. And I was
Right.
like, thank you for spending all this money on me. It's lovely. I can't use any of this. It would take you 20 seconds to see that this is not a good option for me.
Yeah.
And I just found that so interesting of like, we have the access. Now think about what you're putting in that. Spend the extra 30 seconds on the internet learning about these target executives, making sure what you're giving them is tailored to them. And then you put something in there that's really thoughtful.
Yeah.
Actually, and
So
I'll do
that
one.
definitely falls under the going the extra mile, right? Because
Yeah.
then they would have made a very positive impression instead of like a lukewarm one.
You know what? In there was a pair of really thick socks, and I was going to visit my partner's family in Kansas for the holidays, and I was like, "Oh, good! I didn't have these. I will take a men's large thick sock." Other than that, nothing in here is useful.
One other thing that I don't see many B2B marketers using, I'd love your perspective on it, is like influencers, not internal influencers, external influencers, i.e. A marketing channel, right, that isn't ad blockable, right, and that that is very contextually relevant, meaning that someone's an expert in a field and the potentially you can co-create content with them or use them in another way. Do you feel like there's a big opportunity there still for B2B influencers?
I do, for both B2B influencers and then also how you activate your customers. So it is who are the people in your space that have an audience, and if you sell to IT security people, who are the people in IT security that have a good audience and you want to connect with? I'll give you an example. In a past life, I was working in infrastructure. And working in infrastructure, I sell to data engineers. This is who I sell to. We ended up launching a podcast. And it was a podcast all for data engineers. What we ended up doing was, how did we build a list for who we wanted on the podcast? We looked at who are the biggest influencers in that space so we can start that initial connection and build a relationship with. And then who were the companies we wanted to build deeper relationships through from a sales perspective. So that's how we started to get that initial touch point. And we use that as a way to have a reason to meet influencers, have a reason to get there. And then you build that more social connection. And then you can start using them and working more closely with influencers on that. And then activating your community. If you can find ways to really activate your community and get them to respond on your behalf, that's where it becomes this whole like fantastic army of influencers that will just help you out in all situations.
Yeah, I think actually that's probably my favorite part of your point, in a sense that there may be influencers in your current customer set, right? And you're already thinking, oh, they're sold, like, and forgetting that they're an asset that you can use, because you can't get more authentic than an existing customer, right? They love you already. You don't need to sell them on the fact that you're great. They love you. And I think testimonials, and from a perspective of testimonials, not just as a standalone, but really as part of a bigger storytelling, is just not used as often as it should be.
Completely. And I have to say, I had this privilege at Salesloft of working with just the happiest, most passionate customers I have ever met. And it is not just the Salesloft helped me increase revenue by X percent, which I love and is fantastic.
Yeah, you'll take it all day long.
I'll take that all day. But it is also, I talk to customers who are like, no, Salesloft completely changed my life. And I never got to take my kid trick-or-treating for Halloween because it was always end of quarter. So I've never taken my kid trick-or-treating. And then I got Salesloft and I get to take my kid trick-or-treating for Halloween. And sit there going, I love that you hit your number and that's it. But it makes me so like heart happy that people are now having this like real influence and impact on their lives that goes beyond just the revenue impact.
Yeah, and you could never hire a writer to write a better story than that, right? That's like out of real life. That's like an emotional button that people can get pushed.
My favorite story, and I just like it is one of the like early days of Salesloft, like legend stories that again, I love, and I cannot make this up. There was a guy who was an SDR. So he's trying to hit his number. He's trying to do all his calls. He can't do it. And he kept saying, I really want to get a dog, but I can't get a dog because I have too much work to do. He ends up getting Salesloft. It saves him so much time. He's more productive. He's able to hit his number, and he sends us a note and he's like, because of you all, I actually was able to get a dog, and I named it Cadence, which is one of our products. And I was like, oh my gosh, we just helped this guy buy a dog, and he named the dog Cadence.
Right.
I was like, I could have never, ever made something like that up. I love it so much.
Yeah, well, again, I love those real life stories are just super powerful, and you're probably you're still using the story X years later, right? Because it's gone down into legend at this point.
That is like Salesloft legend story of this guy. I was like, I love that he has a dog now. I love that there's a dog running around named Cadence that I feel obligated to find a way to meet this dog.
And you can never rename that that part of the platform, right? It has to be Cadence forever now.
Yes.
So, final question: what has you excited about 2023? Like from either for the industry or personal plans on marketing or business plans.
I like 2023. I think will be a tough year for the likely for much of the world. I am sort of the eternal optimist. And I think back to my own career, and I think back to my career of what made me great at what I do. And honestly, what made me great faster than probably should have happened, what I'm grateful for, is the hard years during the global financial crisis, where all of us had to buckle down and get really, really good, really, really fast, because there was no other choice. We had to get more creative. We had to get more innovative because everything just got harder. I have loved 0% interest rate. Everything is easy. Everything is up and to the right. It has been a lot of fun. I bought my house because of it. I've loved it. Things are going to get harder. And 2022 was harder than 2021. 2023, especially if we go into a recession, is going to get harder. No one wants the hard times, but we all grow faster. We get better faster. We get more creative. We forge tighter bonds in the hard times. And I am not looking forward to hard times. I am looking forward to seeing the innovation and the growth of this industry, of marketers, of myself going, okay, what worked yesterday won't work today. Now, what are we going to do to get better? And like that excites me. I'll be more excited on the other side after it's done versus the part where we're like, oh my gosh, this is so much harder and everything's more expensive.
Yeah, well, it will forge us all into better marketers, and it'll forge sales teams into becoming better salespeople. So that's a great parting thought. Thanks so much for joining me, Lauren. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. This is great. It's great to see you.
Likewise.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.